When the prophet Job lost his family, his response was Adonai Natan, v'Adonai Lakach, Yehi Shem Adonai Mevarach. The Lord gave, the Lord has taken away. Blessed be God's name. And these have to be our words right now as we face the loss of our father and grandfather and relative and friend, Stanley Neuger. And we say, Adonai Natan, the Lord gave us Stan. He enriched our world, made the world a better place, and now Adonai Lakach, and now God has taken him from our midst. But because he was such a blessing in our lives, we thank God for having lent him to us with the words, Yehi Shem Adonai Mevarach. Blessed be God's name, and thank you. This is a time in which we need comfort. So we do what Jews have done throughout the centuries. We turn to the book of Psalms, and there in the book of Psalms we find the words, Esa Einai El HaHarim Me'ayin Yavo Ezri Me'im Adonai Yosei Shemayim Va'aretz. I lift up mine eyes to the mountain. What is the source of my help? My help comes from Adonai, maker of heaven and earth. God will not let your foot give way. Your protector will not slumber. See, the protector of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. God is your guardian. God is your protection at your right hand. The sun will not strike you by day, nor the moon by night. God will guard you from all harm. Adonai yeshmar tzeitcha uvoecha me'ata v'ad olam. May God guard your going and your coming now and forever. Together we recite the words of the 23rd Psalm. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Adonai ma'adam v'teda ehu, ben enosh v'tachash vehu. O God, what are we that you have regard for us, and what are we that you are mindful of us? We are like a breath, our days are as a passing shadow. We come and go like grass, which in the morning shoots up renewed, and in the evening fades and withers. You cause us to revert to dust, saying, Return, O mortal creatures. Would that we were wise, that we understood whither we are going. For when we die, we carry nothing away. Our glory does not accompany us. Mark the wholehearted, and behold the upright, they shall have peace. God, you redeem the soul of your servants, and none who trust in you shall be desolate. And in the book of Ecclesiastes it is written, L'chol zaman v'la'et l'chol chefetz tachat hashemayim, et la'ledef v'et la'mut, et la'tat v'et la'kornetiyah. For everything there is a season and a time for every experience under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot what is planted, a time to tear down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to grieve and a time to dance, a time to throw stones and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to discard, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silence and a time to speak. And this is just one of those moments which is both a time to keep silent, because when you're a mourner you find it very difficult to speak at moments like this. But yet what we know is that people really talk their way through grief, and the more that they can talk, the better off they are. So if I were to make one suggestion to all of you, and that is the biggest help you can be is to get the members of the family to talk and tell the story of Stan and their love of their father and grandfather. And I know that all of us are worried. Maybe we'll say the wrong thing. I just need to remind everyone there are no magic words that take away their pain. The pain is a result of having loved. And so if you want to be the biggest help of all, you can tell them a Stan story, how Stan touched you and the things that you remember about him. And I know they may end up crying, but that is their job as mourners. And we, whose presence, and I can't speak highly enough of just your being here, is the greatest gift you can give them. There are no words that will take away their pain. So we begin to tell the story of Stan Neuger as we call upon his grandchildren first to begin that story. You want to both come up?
When I think of my grandfather, the first word that comes to mind is, oh, sorry. There we go. Better? Oh, thank you. When I think of my grandfather, the first word that comes to my mind is selfless. Although I wasn't around to see it, obviously, he was a member of the greatest generation that went off to war in Europe in World War II and fought evil. And he was awarded Bronze Stars for his bravery, for his efforts. He also cared for my grandmother at home for years while she battled Alzheimer's disease. His devotion to her, though the work of doing that must have been demanding and exhausting, is just another example of his selflessness. And another example that my mom just told me was that not too long ago when she was an adult, he confided in her that he had never particularly enjoyed going to her dance recitals when she was a little girl, but he never told her that, and she had no idea that that was the case. So fully and completely did he hide that from her. My grandfather was an honest person, he was a thoughtful person, and he would do anything to help someone. He loved his family. He was a loving father and grandfather and great-grandfather to 6 great-grandchildren. He loved working on his truck. I know I heard a couple people talking about that. He restored with the help of some friends and colleagues, I think a 1924 truck that is now fully operational and resides with my mom and Sam in Houston, and just took grandchildren for a ride in it. So he did love that truck and all the effort that it took to restore. My grandfather was a self-made businessman, and he was one of the smartest people that I knew. Although he was an engineer, but one of the smartest people I knew, and he never went out of his way to flaunt his intelligence or draw any attention to it. And with all of these examples, he never drew attention to what he was doing. He just went ahead and did it because it was the right thing to do. He was a man of principle, and if he felt like something was the right thing to do, he was going to do it. And that's the way he lived his life. He was truly a man of principle. I wanted to close with a couple of my favorite memories, and I have a couple words to share from one of my brothers as well. One of my favorite memories with my grandfather was the Thanksgiving when we all sat down after dinner, and he told stories about his service in World War II, and many of our immediate family were there. I thought all, but perhaps not. Even my later-to-be husband was there at the time. And I'm so fortunate and so glad that we had the foresight to record his stories and on audio tape. At least at the time, that was sort of state of the art. So we do have his stories in his own words, in his own voice, and I look forward to sharing those stories with my own kids when they're just a bit bigger. And then my second favorite memory is I remember him coming to Florida in these last few years as he got older, and with me bringing my kids to see him at the hotel where they stayed with Aunt Judy, and the kids would run around and be kind of crazy. And he was always, he seemed so proud to have them there, and he would walk them around and introduce them and to friends and people that he knew from there. And I have this great picture of Grandpa in his 90s holding my son as an infant, both of them with these big smiles on their face. It's really a lovely photo and something that I cherish. And I just feel so fortunate that he lived to see his great-grandchildren. I know not everyone does, and I like to think now that he's kind of looking down at us with Grandma Millie and admiring the generations of their family and inspiring the same kind of principled and selfless conduct that he taught himself through his actions. You want me to share from Brian?
Sure.
I also wanted to share something from one of my brothers who's not able to be here. I'm just going to read it so you'll hear it in his own words. He says, I remember Stan most for a lengthy conversation we had in 1996. He regaled me with stories of growing up during the Depression and his experiences in World War II. I asked him multiple times about post-war experiences, stories, etc. It was always, I came home, I raised a family. That's what you do. That's how he lived most of his life. He raised his family. He was there for his family. During my conversations with him for the past 15 years, he always asked if my job was okay, because that's how you support the family. He would also remind me over the years to always be there for my wife and kids. So that's what I do.
Thank you all for being here. So I used to address my grandfather in a formal, informal way. It was a loving nickname of sorts, and so I used to say, "Hello, grandfather." And he would say, "Well, hello, Dawn." And he would reply this way out of a sweet way that we always connected and communicated. And I did this always with the intention of conveying to him my immense respect for who he was. In my eyes, my grandfather was what I always called a Renaissance man. By definition, a Renaissance man is one who's knowledgeable, educated, and proficient in a wide range of fields. This was definitely my grandfather. He was noted by all who knew him to be a great dad, a great grandfather, a great husband, a great businessman, a great athlete, working out daily up until the end, and once upon a time a great soldier decorated with bronze stars, and always a great human being. More than anything to me, the idea that he was a Renaissance man also spoke to me of his core character values. He was ethical, moral, honest, loving, patient, loyal, and dependable. He had integrity, fortitude, and conviction, stamina, 98 years of it, and wisdom. He lived modestly, humbly, graciously, never sharing the greatness that he was in that way, and with mindfulness in everything he did. These are qualities seldom seen in and even less appreciated by my generation. Yet they are admirable beyond words. My grandfather spent just shy of 98 years living daily by his convictions. He was the great patriarch of our family without a doubt, and he was a most honorable man and human being. He taught me by living example how to live life right. I seldom took his good advice. My generation is less fortunate to not have such great patriarchs as my grandfather. To me, with his passing, goes the last Renaissance man I and the modern world may ever have the pleasure and honor of knowing. For me and my family, loving and honoring his now spiritual essence is what carries on. That, and he knew I would always say with both thanks and jest, his great genetics. Thank you all for being here for us.
Judith and Danny, Linda and Sam, Oliver, Shalom, Joseph and Sanford, and Harold and Faye, and grandchildren, Linnell and Danny, and Brian and Amy, and Adam and Dawn and Stephen, great-grandchildren, Isabel and David and Leo and Talia and Skylin, friends, those from Montefiore, from Wiggins, I know better than that. If I were a smart rabbi, I would simply say amen to what the kids have said and sit down. But sometimes when you, A, write a eulogy, and secondly, when there's something beautiful to say, sometimes you say it twice. So some of the things that I will say, of course, are the repeats of the way he touched his grandchildren, his granddaughters. I can never say it with the emotion that you portrayed, and we thank you. I have memories of Stan, your dad, your father-in-law, your grandfather. But my memory is seeing him standing sweating in front of his locker where he had just finished work over at Bally's, and I was there dripping in sweat from having played racquetball. And he and I began to share stories and talk. And it was soon that I learned about his incredible care of Mildred. I listened to this story, and I had the greatest admiration for him. It was not a few weeks of care or a few months of care, but it was years. He dedicated his life in the latter years of their marriage to the devoted care of Mildred, bathing her, feeding her, taking her to work with him so that she was protected. Judy and Linda, you told me of the time when Mildred was so worried and crying and who was going to take care of her and how was she going to exist and so forth. And Stan got up, walked over, held her in his arms and said, "I promise I will take care of you." And he did. What admiration I had for Stan as I learned more of this story at the time of Mildred's funeral. Stan Neuger was born in Philadelphia and moved here with his parents, Samuel and Ethel, here to Cleveland. We talked about his close relationship with his mother and his love of his mother and how good he was to her. His brothers, Joseph and Stanford and Harold, were very close. They regularly, weekly, they had lunch together as a family. And unfortunately, Faye died when she was 3 years old. Stan went to John Adams High School and then went on to Lehigh University and studied engineering. He was, I think it was an intern at Acme Engineering when he met Mildred. And he met her, and then he was standing at the bus stop, and Mildred and her brother Edward were driving home, and they stopped and picked him up and offered him a ride, and that was it. 68 years. A long ride is what it was. The early years were wonderful, even though, as we kidded yesterday, that Mildred had to buy her own engagement ring. Because Stan was so devoted to his family that he was sending money to his family to help to support them and so forth, and so Mildred bought her own engagement ring, and but he made it up to her. He graduated Lehigh, got drafted in the United States Army. He goes off to Europe as part of the medical corps, and as we heard, he saved lives. He was at Normandy in the Battle of the Bulge, 3 Bronze Stars and a Purple Heart. He returns home, works as an engineer in the petroleum industry, but Stan didn't have the patience to sit behind a drafting board. He was impatient and so forth. He wanted action, and so he leaves and he starts his own business. And as the girls told you, he was very successful in the petroleum distribution business, putting oil and antifreeze in cans and so forth, the ones we see in the various stores or the gas stations and so forth. Sells them around northeastern Ohio, plus. He had a plant down in Sylvania, not Sylvania. What? Sullivan. I knew it was. I didn't write it down, but I tried to remember it. In Sullivan. So you have to ask the question, where's Sullivan? But that's beside it. He built a very successful business, and his employees loved him. He especially had a wonderful relationship with Alfred, who was like a father to him. He was generous with Alfred, that kind of care he gave his cars to and so forth. Stan was hands-on with his customers who adored him because Stan was nice and he was kind and he was honest, as we heard. Stan got burned a few times because of that, but, that didn't shake his confidence in human beings. He was humble, and he had a great sense of humor. I guess he had a whole repertoire of corny jokes that he, when he moved into Wiggins, it was great because he had a whole new audience and so forth. He was generous and helped everyone who asked him. Whenever somebody needed him, he was there. Patriotic. He would only buy U.S. cars. This result of the flag being on his coffin as a sign of his great love of America. One of Stan's great traits, besides his working out and playing tennis and bowling and golf and swimming, was that he was very handy. He built a garage in back of the house. He had a workbench with all kinds of tools on it. And then, of course, as you told us, his love of that 1924 white motor truck that refinished, and so excited that you as a family have it and still driven regularly. And I add to all of this, Stan was very intelligent. We talked about just yesterday the math he could do in his head before you could get your calculator out, Linda. He already had it done. In the earlier days, they traveled as a couple to Israel, Egypt, Hawaii, Mexico, North Carolina, and, of course, a lot of time in Florida. Stan had a lot of good friends, partly because he was a good friend to others. But more than all these accomplishments, Stan was a wonderful father to you, his two daughters. You admired and adored him, and he was a role model for you. He was caring and kind towards you, supported your various activities. You heard the cute story about his going to Linda's dance recitals, and even though he had a smile on his face when he did it, but he hated it. And Judy tells a story that Stan knew that one day before she was 16 that she drove the car, actually a long way too. I don't tell how far. And she learned later that Stan had learned that she had done that, but never really punished her for it and so forth. Maybe it's because he adored his daughters so much. You had a great relationship with your dad. As I said, he was your role model and idol. He adored Sam and Danny, and you in turn treated him like a father, felt like he was another father to you as well. Judy, I can't compliment you enough for your care of Stan during these last years. You were there for him in every way, and you slept there many, many nights. And the cute story is that, I don't know if it's cute for your sleep, but she was sleeping and Stan would wake her up, and because he had these dreams of still being at work and things to do. So to speak, he worked his entire life right up until the end. But you were so devoted to her, and both of you. I mean, Linda, you came in on a regular basis and were part of it. We heard the grandchildren and their great admiration for their father. What could be more impressive than words like this? I think the most impressive words that I heard were a couple of words yesterday at the end of our meeting. Words that said, like, describe your dad, some man, that he belonged in the book of great Americans in the sense of contributing to this country, that he was a very good person, And what more can we want for people to look at us and say that? The rabbis say, Maaseh avot siman labanim. The deeds of parents are guideposts for the children. And surely Stan Neuger's deeds will be a guidepost for the family. It'll be a guidepost for us who knew him and admired him. And so we say to Stan, thank you. Thank you for a job well done. Lech b'shalom, go in peace now. For you have accomplished what you set out to accomplish and the dreams you had, and you left behind a wonderful family and people who admire. Now, I know that there are probably some others here who want to say, oh, but you left out and so forth. So I would encourage you during these next moments of silence to say them to Stan and to think about how he touched you in your life. We pray silently. For Stan Neuger's love that united us in life and which death cannot sever. For his companionship that we shared along life's path and which continues to the tenderness of memory. For the gifts of his heart and mind that brought us joy and happiness and now a precious remembrance. For all these and more we give our thanks to God, and may the words of our mouths and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O God, our strength and our Redeemer. And let us all say, Amen. We rise now for the El Malei Rachamim. El Malei Rachamim. Shochem Bamromim. Hamsei Menucha Nechuna Tachat Kanfei HaShekhinah. Im Kedoshim Taharim Kazohar Haraki Amazirim. Et Nishmat Shaya Ben Yisrael. Shehalach Olamo. Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to Stan Neuger, the son of Sam and Ethel Neuger, who has entered eternity. Baal harachamim yastirehu b'sedek hanafav lolamim v'yitzrur b'tzrur hachayim et nishmato Adonai hu nachalato. V'yanuach b'shalom al mishkavo v'nomar. Amen. O God of mercy, let him find refuge in your eternal presence, and let his soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is his inheritance. May he rest in peace. And let us all say, Amen. You may be seated. This concludes our service here. We will continue at the graveside and then return to the home of Judith and Daniel Wolf. And it is at 5227 Dogwood Trail in Lyndhurst. The family will be receiving today until 5 o'clock. And then tomorrow night from 7 to 9, and on Sunday afternoon from 1 to 4. Friends who wish may contribute to the American Heart Association or the charity of your choice.